No, I still haven't beaten Shadow Sorcerer, and frankly, I'm not going to. I've accepted that reality at this point mainly because I'm not sure how likely it is that this game can actually be conquered. I haven't found any real evidence of anyone beating it online, nor are there any guides that anyone has published over the years. I mean, for the love of God, one of the original manuals of the game advises against saving too often because, quote, that's what losers do. I mean, that's not like an exact quote, but like, sure, man, fine. Whatever. If you played this game back in the day around its release and actually managed to beat it, let me know. Then, tell me which psychiatric ward you're currently a resident of so I can ensure that I'm never within 100 miles of you. But considering I've spent a pretty significant amount of time actually playing it, I do want to take a moment to talk about it. Now, I'm not really interested in litigating the literal merits of this game. It's a Silverbox title developed by US Gold, and much like Heroes of the Lance, it's awful. At this point, I don't see much purpose in going through a long-winded analysis about how a company that I'm not sure has ever worked on a decent game, though they did publish a few good ones, managed to butcher another Dragonlance adventure. It's the expectation, not the exception, that Shadow Sorcerer is awful. A lot of what I said in the Heroes of the Lance video holds true here. What's ironic is that despite being essentially equally as terrible as the other Silverbox games, it is far more technically impressive. The graphics are much sleeker, it has some real sound capabilities beyond ear-splitting bleeps and blorps, and some user-friendly features such as mouse support. Honestly, I can't decide if that fact makes how unfun and backbreakingly difficult the gameplay is, leave Shadow Sorcerer as better or worse in comparison to the other Silverbox games. On one hand, at least it isn't liable to make you go blind, but on the other, that it clearly had better technology at its disposal means that it had even less of an excuse for being so awful. What a conundrum, my goodness. What's more disappointing is that the game's premise is pretty cool. It adapts two tabletop modules, Dragons of Hope and Desolation, which lets the player take the role of the Heroes of the Lance once again as they attempt to rescue a group of refugees from the ruined city of Pax Tharkus, which has been overrun by evil draconians. The reason this is interesting is because Dragons of Hope and Desolation were later adapted into a book by the name of Dragons of the Dwarven Depths in 2006. In a roundabout way, that means Shadow Sorcerer serves as a game adaptation of the plot of a book that came out 15 years after said game. I honestly can't say I've ever really seen anything like that before, which makes it pretty neat, if you ask me. Unfortunately, the actual goal of the story, and by extension, Shadow Sorcerer, is part of why it's so unfun. Beyond being cumbersome in terms of mechanics, as you might expect, the objective of the game is to successfully get the refugees to safety. Yes, the entire game is one long escort quest, and considering this isn't Resident Evil 4, that means it's about as entertaining as an impromptu lecture from a crypto bro about why Dogecoin is going to the moon. The refugees quite simply might be the dumbest collection of people ever assembled. They're constantly trying to split up, they have to consult on every little decision, and run through food stores like Tony Montana did Smack. Were it not for the fact that letting them die makes you lose the game, you would feel no sympathy for them whatsoever or responsibility to keep them alive. But again, I don't really want to talk about this game itself, which is going to make the fact that I think it's a pretty important title in the pantheon of D&D games seem real weird. So, both in my time playing it and reading some of the few examples of commentary that exist on the internet about this hellscape of a game, something pretty poignant started to reveal itself to me. Let me pose this question. Does anything about this game, specifically in the way that it plays, look familiar? No? Nothing about the overworld travel screen that features a number of isolated locations? Many of those areas feature optional side quests that can grant you additional benefits along your quests as well. How about the collection of characters which you can drop in and out of your party to utilize in combat? Speaking of combat, does the isometric viewpoint it all takes place in, as well as the ability to pause at will to plan your next move and set scripts which allow the computer to take control, ring any bells? Goodness gracious, Shadow Sorcerer did Baldur's Gate before Baldur's Gate did. Yes, as hard as it might be to believe, there are some legitimate similarities between Shadow Sorcerer and the Infinity Engine classics that we have all come to know and love. Some odd 7 years before the original Baldur's Gate would hit store shelves, you had a lot of the qualities that would make it so beloved present in this game. You have to remember, up until around the time Shadow Sorcerer came out, pretty much every D&D game outside of the Gold Box titles was joke adjacent and not at all what one would come to expect from games bearing the license of the most popular tabletop role-playing system in the world. It was stuff like the action, if it can be called that, based Hillsfar and Heroes of the Lance, or the flight simulator that was Dragon Strike. By the way, no, I'll never make a video about this game, as these older flight sims literally make me sick to my stomach. However, the D&D wizard and Warhammer warlock himself, William SRD, made a great video about it a ways back that you can check out if you're so inclined. The point is, unless you were playing a gold box game, there wasn't a whole lot of D&D in your D&D video gaming, you get what I'm saying? And Shadow Sorcerer, by some sort of miracle, kind of represents an inflection point in that respect. The need to manage both your party and the refugees, the fact that combat requires thought and planning, and the numerous story points, which of course can only be found in the manual because why would US Gold have been bothered to put them in the game proper, means you are treated to some legitimate role-playing aspects. Granted, it still doesn't make anywhere near effective use of the license or systems, things like character and item stats are largely pointless, but overall it represents a step in the right direction. And for as many warts as Shadow Sorcerer may have when regarded today, publications and gamers clearly appreciated this proper, more deep-seated role-playing experience, if the fact that it was received pretty well at the time of its release is any indication. Now, I'm not going to sit here and earnestly try to convince you that we have Shadow Sorcerer to thank for bringing us Baldur's Gate. I would say games within the Ultima series, which were some of the first to bring real, tangible RPG elements to gaming outside of a viewfinder window, and, this little title called Fallout, deserve far more credence for laying the groundwork that the Infinity Engine titles would be built upon. But Shadow Sorcerer was really the first D&D game to display these sorts of features, and for that, it does deserve some credit and recognition. It helped to prove that D&D games could successfully correlate what was originally found in the tabletop setting as technology and gaming expectations expanded. Granted, Eye of the Beholder did much the same a year earlier, and, as if it needs saying, is a far better game, but it only did so within systems and presentations that were already known to the license, being adventures in a first-person viewfinder namely. Perhaps it's better served to say that Shadow Sorcerer helped to spawn games like the Dark Sun duo of Shattered Lands and Wake of the Ravager, both of which stand head and shoulders above US Gold's dismal effort as role-playing games and adaptations of the nuts and bolts of D&D systems and rule sets, but having played through Baldur's Gate recently, I couldn't help but be struck by the similarities between the two. I think more than anything, in part due to the reception it received, as well as the souring of opinion that was slowly overtaking the Gold Box series, Shadow Sorcerer represented a moment in time where SSI, the publisher of all of these games, realized what direction they would have to go towards to stand up to the competition. The shift towards the conscious implementation of these more advanced systems was basically immediate, regardless of the genre of D&D game that was released. Obviously, SSI wouldn't be in charge when that maturity reached its apex with the Infinity Engine games, but they did play a part in charting the course. Shadow Sorcerer deserves precisely zero applause for what it is as a game, but it does deserve some credit for setting everything I just laid out in motion by being brave enough to break some new ground in trying to deliver a more fully fledged role-playing experience.